My guest today is David Icke. He is an English writer, public speaker, and former media personality, best known for his views on what he calls, quote, who and what is really controlling the world, describing himself as the most controversial speaker and author in the world, which I agree with. He has written many books explaining his position, dubbed New Age conspiracism, and has attracted a substantial following across the political spectrum. His 533-page The Biggest Secret, published in 1999, has been called the conspiracy theorist Rosetta Stone. David Icke, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thanks, mate. I'm not sure about the New Age part of the conspiracy theorist, and I'm not sure about the conspiracy theorist part of the New Age either. It's funny, isn't it, how things get repeated, like in the mainstream media. Whenever I'm mentioned, I'm a conspiracy theorist, just like you and everybody else. When that, of course, came from the CIA in the 1960s, urging American media outlets to use the term conspiracy theorist and conspiracy theory to discredit legitimate research into the ludicrous official narratives of what was going on in the 60s, like the Kennedy assassination.
Well, and so many of those things have turned out to, the theories have turned out to be the absolute truth, that it's especially, and interestingly, I mean, we're coming into a time now, we were talking before the show started, we were talking a little bit about how interesting the move has been and the acceptance has been of these things that were thought of as being so outside of the mainstream. I know we were talking when I first discovered your work, there was no YouTube, certainly. I was getting these sort of like pirated videos that people were putting up from around the web. If you would, could you talk to us just a little bit about what that journey has been like for you? You must certainly feel vindicated nowadays.
Well, yeah, but I'm delighted because when I started out, if you were doing an event, you had leaflets printed and you tried to persuade people to hand them out to their friends. That's where we were. There was no internet. It theoretically existed, but not much more. And you had to get the word out through word of mouth, which obviously was very slow. And when I first came to America to speak on these subjects in about 96, something like that, I was talking in people's front rooms. I went all the way up to New England to speak near Boston, and spoke in someone's front room to 5 people. I spoke near Chicago and got 8 people. Crikey, good night. Get nearly double figures now. And I would be invited to these whole life expos, which were obviously based on the kind of New Age arena. And I'd get put on at the end of the night when everyone had gone home, because I was this strange conspiracy guy. And I remember one near Phoenix, I wasn't even put on inside. I was put on in a like horse corral, literally outside late at night in the main arena next door. Inside was a big, at the time, New Age speaker, packing them out. And I was literally in the horse corral next door, and it was freezing. And the longer it went on, the colder it got. I wouldn't have sat in the audience and heard me that night because it was so cold. People were leaving slowly after they got blankets, and they were cold with the blankets, so they left. And this was the kind of strange situation you found yourself in. And there were times when you thought, what is the point? But something drives you on, something unspoken, something you can't really put words to. It's just, it's going somewhere. I know it. And all the evidence is telling me it's not, but it is. And that's the way it's turned out. And I think what has happened is it's literally, because I'm always saying this, it's not about the personality. It's not about me. It's about the information. That has got to be first, second, third, and last the most important thing and the whole focus. What is best for the information? Not what is best for this individual, that individual in that moment. What is best for the information? And it's the power of the information that actually made the difference, for a simple reason. It's made more sense than the official narratives.
Right, right.
It's out credibilitated them, if you like, to invent a word. And that's its power. And that's why, of course, now we've got this fake news hoax. I'm the last one to say there's not fake news in what's called the alternative media, but where the fake news is, it's not the alternative media. It just claims to be.
Right.
But this fake news hoax is a response to the power of information when it's presented and people hear it. And that's why now, although, of course, it's still the vast majority are buying the official story, but compared with the period that we're talking about, when I'm standing in the horse corral near Phoenix, it's much more difficult now in terms of numbers for the official narrative to be accepted unchallenged. More and more people are saying, hold on a minute, who benefits? And such questions which invariably unravel the official story.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about this information, and especially going back to a time when I think now we can, in many ways, we can sort of crowdsource our truth. In that, as you say, while there is some fake news in the alternative media, that's quickly squashed by people being able to refute it almost instantaneously. I want to go back a little bit and talk about how you've been right on so many things. You introduced people to so many things that were not in the mainstream at a time when this information was not readily available to the public, except as you were presenting it. How were you able to get a hold of this information in light of that sort of environment? And two, what have been the tools? Because I think this would be very helpful for people who are trying to sort through. What are your cognitive or mental tools for saying, yes, this is real, or this feels real, this is credible, or this is not? What are those tools?
Well, this will take us into some deep areas, really, because nearly 30 years ago, I went to see a psychic because I was in television at the time, because some strange things were happening around me. I kept feeling a presence around me for a year. When I was in a room alone, it didn't feel I was alone. And I went to see this psychic. I came across a book by accident. I'd never seen a psychic in my life before. And to see if she would pick up what was going on. Never said anything to her. Anyway, after a couple of visits, she did. And various things paranormal happened, if you like, in psychic mode. And this lady was telling me in March 1990, and I was just a television presenter at the time, that I was going to go out on the world stage and reveal great secrets. And that, in effect, there was a force that was going to take me through it and reveal it to me. And from that moment, my life became an incredible synchronistic journey of walking into information, walking into people, walking into books, walking into documents, walking into personal experiences that were clearly offering a pattern of information. It was like someone sitting with a jigsaw puzzle, and some force handing you the puzzle pieces. And in the early years, it was all the five sense world of secret societies and semi-secret groups that were manipulating the world of the seen. Then the information took me into the world of, shall we say, the non-humans, and crucially then into the illusory nature of physical reality and the way reality really works, as opposed to how we experience it. And it's been, the challenge for me has been to go with the information even when I knew that I was going to face tremendous ridicule for putting that in the public arena. And people have said to me, when you said so-and-so and so-and-so, didn't you think people were going to laugh and ridicule? I'm going, do you know, I think I'd worked that out. Well, either it's the truth or it's not. And what I've done through all these years is follow my intuition. And see, people can think that intuition is kind of hit and miss, but intuition is our connection to much more expanded states of awareness. It comes from here, from the heart. It's where you feel it. I feel it anyway. And there's an energetic vibe that says, yes, this is right. And there's another one that says, no, this is not right. And over the last 30 years, I've followed that and taken what I felt was right, supported it with 5 sense world information to a very large extent, whenever possible, and it's becoming more and more possible, and rejected the rest. And I remember someone said to me once, an insider, he said, you've quoted a disinformer in your book. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, but you've only quoted the bit that's true. How did you do that? And I said the same thing. You know, I'm not sitting cross-legged on a mountain saying, hey, I'm special. No, this is what anyone can do. This is the whole point of what I'm trying to get across, is that we are incredible expressions of awareness, of consciousness, of potential. We are all possibility. But what the system has done, because it's had to, you can't control and oppress people who are aware of their true self, that we are pure consciousness having an experience, all that is, has been, and ever can be. You have to persuade them that they're Ethel working down the store or on the checkout, and they're just little me and they have no power. And what you see in the mirror is all that you are. You are your name, you are your job, you are your life story, you are your race, your religion, your income bracket, what I call phantom self. And by doing that, you persuade people they have no power. And if you can persuade people in large numbers they have no power, what are they going to do? They're going to look to those they think have the power to tell them what to do and tell them what to think and to run the world for them. And all these other senses, which this manipulation desensitizes people from, so that the only arbiter of reality and what's true and what's not true and the world we live in is the 5 senses. Can I see it, touch it, taste it, hear it? Okay, it must exist then, which of course is the foundation of overwhelmingly the greatest majority of mainstream science. All these sensitivities go, and yet they're just sitting there dormant, waiting to be used, and we can all use them. It's just a choice. So on top of all that, in terms of judging what's true and not true, beyond all that deeper stuff, it's hours of research, and not accepting that just because someone even in the alternative media has said this is what's going on, you check it out. Does it stand up? Because when RT, Russia Today, has this this slogan it uses from time to time, question more, it's actually one step back from what it should be saying. It should be saying question everything.
Right.
And when you do that and you cross-reference and cross-reference and cross-reference, eventually there comes a point where you cross the line of credibility. You have enough supporting evidence here to go with this. And if your intuition's also going, go with it. That combination can be very, very powerful in getting at least as near to the truth as we can. Where you're going to get scammed is if you just accept information on the face of it without checking it out. And as we've seen with the way significant parts of the alternative media have been scammed by Trump.
Yes.
That's falling for allowing people to tell you what you want to hear. Telling people what they want to hear is one of the greatest forms of perception manipulation. Because as we know in this alternative arena, when you tell people what they don't want to hear, i.e. the world is not what they thought it was, and actually there's a force in the shadows that's manipulating all this to a very malevolent agenda, people don't want to hear that. And if they don't want to hear it, they're much more likely to push it away. People don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. So the alternative to that is what politicians do, what Trump did. He looked at his constituency of potential support, and those around him did. And part of that potential support were people that look for their information from the alternative media.
Right.
So what he did was, as part of his campaign, he told the alternative media what it wanted to hear. And unfortunately, some people bought it because it was what they wanted to hear. And, you know, if you looked at it dispassionately, and this is what we have to do all the time, I don't care if it's my best mate. You know, if they tell me something, I'm going to check it out to see if it stands up before I communicate it, so that I'm actually confident it's true. And so you don't become a repeater of someone else's information all the time. And so when you looked at it dispassionately and you saw how the Democratic Party conspired to, its hierarchy anyway, conspired to stop Bernie Sanders getting anywhere near the nomination and ensured that Hillary Clinton got it. Are we naive enough to think that if the Republican Party really, really didn't want Trump, that there would have been some point in all those months that they would have ensured that wasn't going to happen? And what Trump is doing is serving this agenda very well, not least because he's a very divisive influence. He pushes people apart. He doesn't bring them together. Of course, divide and rule is the foundation method of the few controlling the many throughout known and probably unknown human history. And the other thing, of course, has happened, and you know, what we have the opportunity to do now, as a human race and as an alternative media, is to learn very basic lessons and never forget them. And Barack Obama and Donald Trump have given us that gift, if you like. Because on the so-called left, and I emphasize the so-called left, we had Obama, who spent his first election campaign telling everybody what they wanted to hear. That was his natural constituency. And telling people that he was all about change, 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 change. And the reason they talk about change all the time in election campaigns is because of the way the system works. The status quo is not very popular with most people at any point. So tell them you're going to change the status quo, and you've already got people, his ears pricking up. And he went in, and for 8 years, he did virtually the opposite of what he said he would do, and not what he said he would do, not least over Guantanamo. He was promoted as Mr. Peace and got the Nobel Peace Prize, and there wasn't a day in his entire 8 years when America wasn't at war with somebody. And you'd think that the so-called progressive left would say to themselves, it's not credible any longer to go on accepting what these people say and believing they'll do it. And then Trump's come in, the apparent polarity to Obama, and he's gone through the same process if you break it down. And the only difference between Obama and Trump is that Trump has broken all records for U-turning on the basic planks of his election campaign.
Yes.
And what has happened is he's just dropped in to become the mouthpiece for the same hidden hand that Obama was and Bush was, and they're going down the same route. See, if you look at the Project for the New American Century and that document in September 2000, when they named that list of countries for regime change, and they've ticked them off ever since. First of all, when Bush came in and the Project for the New American Century writers came in with him, people like Cheney and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and Zackheim, they picked off one on that list, Iraq. Then a completely different lot come in with Obama, a different lot from Blair in Britain come in with Cameron, and they pick off Libya and still trying to pick off Syria.
Right.
Now, the big prize at the end of that list in 2000 was Iran. And here's Trump, Mr. Change, I'm anti-establishment, I'm going to drain the swamp. He's been swimming in it all his life. Why would he want to drain it? And now he's come in, and who is he targeting?
Iran.
Yeah. And it's the same agenda. And what they do is change the rhetoric to persuade people just one more time, just one more election. This is different this time. And it never is. For the simple reason that to run for president, let alone to win office, requires such a phenomenal amount of money and backing from people with a phenomenal amount of money that genuine people, I mean, Bernie Sanders, I'm not saying he is, God's gift to politics, but he was more genuine than Clinton, mind you, crikey, who is. But he had no chance, right? They just, no, you're not getting it. So this is how it works. So when you see this, it's incredibly naive to think that someone's bucked the system. And we've got to then start looking at changing things directly ourselves through refusing to cooperate with our own enslavement, which then makes the politicians react to us instead of us constantly having to react to them. And there is, we're talking here about the way interest in this information has increased dramatically and dramatically and dramatically. Yes. And that is starting to manifest. It manifested with the Brexit vote when people in this country, they're trying desperately to stop it now and water it down. But people voted for Brexit in this country against the demands and the fear-mongering of virtually the entirety of the political class in Britain, from left to right. They voted for Trump in large numbers, not because of what he is, but because of the perception of what he was. He promoted himself as an outsider. We've just had a guy, Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition party leader in Britain, who's just promoted himself in an election campaign as the outsider and the anti-establishment. And he got tremendously more support than ever he was expected to get. People are now starting to challenge the status quo and question the status quo and say we're not having it anymore. And it's just the beginning.
I want to talk with you a little bit about what has happened in the last couple of weeks in the UK, because I'm still, obviously, the narrative about these two attacks is rotten to the core. But I was also very interested in, and maybe you can comment on this, the idea that it seemed to me that the attacks would serve the interests of the conservatives more than anyone, and yet now it seems as though that didn't happen. I'm interested because certainly in the United States it goes the other direction. I'm interested in your thoughts. It's clearly moving in the direction it was supposed to be moving, and maybe it's away from Brexit. But where do you think that the disconnect is there? Why did that thing not pan out in the way that May and others had thought that it might?
Well, I think you can't underestimate the catastrophic nature of the Theresa May Conservative Party campaign, the governing party's campaign. I mean, first of all, she announced an election she didn't have to announce, and then proceeded to say and do everything that would lose her votes. I mean, the manifesto was a suicide
Yeah,
note.
exactly.
It targeted the very natural conservative voters, older people that voted conservative in large numbers. So it was a catastrophic campaign. But another part of the situation with the terrorism, people are now questioning. They are more than ever before that something's not right with all this, and the Conservative Party's kind of selling point is that they are tough on terror and they are the party of security.
Right.
Well, having two terrorist attacks in a 3.5 week or so election campaign, two horrific ones, really did show that they're not. So things are changing. They can't sell the narrative like they could before as easily as they could before. Because not only did, of course, they have these terror attacks to exploit, and she did her best to exploit them, not least promising to have government control of the internet if she got back in. That also went down like a lead balloon. But the government supporting Conservative Party newspapers were targeting her opponent, Jeremy Corbyn, day after day as being a friend of terrorists. So they were pushing it down both avenues. Here's terrorist attacks, and this man's a friend of terrorists. You should hate him. But it didn't work because, these forces of authority have got to now start getting used to the fact that the game is changing for a simple reason. Human perception is changing. What they could get away with unquestioningly before, they can't now among great numbers of people. And that's extremely encouraging because, just putting this information out and making people aware of it is only part of this whole necessity of what the alternative media is doing. We need people to respond in their perceptions and therefore their actions to what this information is showing. I hear this term all the time. Knowledge is power. It's not. It's not. The use of knowledge is power. Power is not there if you have knowledge but don't use it. You might as well not have it. The use of knowledge is power. And that's where we need to go now, to start to get people to look at the world in a different way. And instead of focusing on the manufactured opposition, I'm left, I'm progressive, you're a fascist, I'm a conservative, you're a communist, and all this stuff. It's to say, hold on a minute. Let's stop focusing on the oil rags like Trump and Theresa May and Obama and Cameron and Blair so much. Don't say that we don't at all. But let's turn our focus on that which is always there. Because, these politicians come and go, but there's a force that's always there. I say to people, all over America are secret underground bases, these DUMBs, deep underground military bases, where presidents don't have a high enough security clearance to know what's going on there. So this is the question. What's the force, what's the authority that's deciding what goes on there? Because it's not the White House. There'll be someone else in the White House eventually, and they won't know either. Obama didn't know. Trump won't know. So it's this force that's always there that we need to focus on. In America, certainly under Trump and Bush, but also Obama, the most seeable level of this force are the neocons.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, they are a front for a front for a front for a
Hmm.
front. But in terms of the public arena and the way the hidden hand directly interacts with the politics of the scene, it's the neocons. That's who we should be focusing on, not the puppets, but the puppeteers. And then we might get somewhere.
I want to ask you, because it has been very disconcerting to me. You've been one of the few people who I think has stayed consistent. I mean, you've stayed consistent your entire career, and in some ways, I feel like that almost inoculates you from being co-opted. But as we talk about this sort of greater power, some of the larger alternative media personalities who had at certain points locked in to these same concepts that yes, beyond who's in office, there is a greater power, and those people can't even control that power. I feel that so many of them in this last election allowed themselves to be co-opted, and now even after we're talking about, and I'm not going to name any names, and I more want your thoughts on the psychological process behind that, and why that hasn't affected you over the years, but allowed themselves, and now as we're seeing, as you say, Trump flip-flop, they've gone from really trying to get to the core of where the power really is to becoming apologists for a puppet. What is the psychological process behind that? Why has that not happened to you? What do you feel that it is that's different about your message or your approach that allows you to basically stick with it and to not fall into this?
Well, first of all, I'm not interested in pushing an agenda. I'm interested in uncovering the truth. This is why I don't support political parties. I don't support politicians. I put information out there and then let people make their own minds up what they support and what they don't. My, if you like, decided role is to put information into the public arena that wouldn't normally get there, so people can make a more informed decision over a greater swathe of information and possibility than they would without this information. So I'm completely dispassionate about what goes on beyond that. The other thing is that personally, I'm coming from this point of view. I am a point of attention within infinite awareness, infinite possibility. And that point of attention currently has been given the name David Icke. But it's just a name, it's just a label. The body I'm experiencing through is a temporary vehicle, given the name David Icke, for that infinite point of attention, that eternal point of attention. That point of attention that can perceive itself to be Ethel on the checkout, or all that is, has been, and ever can be. It's just a way of deciding how expansive we believe we really are, and therefore I don't connect with or identify with a country, a race, a religion, a political movement, a political party, any of it. If you are coming from a self-identity that you are, for instance, American, or you're coming from a self-identity even smaller that you are a John Wayne American, then that can completely scramble your judgment and your way of seeing situations, other people like Trump. You can still see this as a fight between the left and the right. And it's what I call, because, you can talk about these things and these psychological things very much through the analogy of computers and software. And people have default positions. They have default modes. And if your default mode is I am American, and particularly I am a John Wayne American, you can go along a road of seeing that a hidden force is controlling all sides. You can talk about false flag events that have been set up to demonize the target. But then something comes along, and Trump has done this, I think, for a lot of this mentality in America. And you get kicked back into default position. And suddenly you've shape-shifted. All that's gone before, all the narrative, all the way of dissecting events and dissecting situations, all gone, as if it's never been there. Suddenly, instead of seeing that one single force is manipulating both sides, suddenly, no, this person's different. He's different. You know why he's different? He's saying what I believe is right. He's telling me what I want to hear. Right. He's different. He called me. He called me.
Right.
Hey, hey, he's got to be right. And you know those false flags that we were talking about? Those false flags where they set up people to do terrorist events because they wanted to get an outcome? No. It's the Muslims. Right. It's the Muslims. That's the problem. And suddenly you're looking at very, very different people because the default position has kicked in and the reboot. And it's been fascinating to watch. And I think also very sad because if we are going to be alternative, if we are going to put forward a view of events that questions the official narrative, then we have to be dispassionate from these things. We can't get pulled into personalities. We can't get pulled into prejudice. We can't get pulled into saying things are happening and are right because it suits our belief system. We've got to be one step back and more than one step back from everything. So when someone that we generally might agree with some of the things that they says, we check them out as well. We treat them with the same questioning as we treat people that vehemently are saying things that we don't agree with. Because that's the only way that you arrive at the truth. Once you have an outcome that you would like it to be, i.e. Trump is different, then you'll start editing, censoring, not hearing, not seeing things that tell you something different or point to things being not what you'd like them to be. And these are all psychological cul-de-sacs. These are all psychological slip roads off the freeway that take people off the direction that we need to go, which is to look at the picture in its entirety all the time and never get pulled into the pixels, which obscure the picture. No, don't get caught into the twigs, which obscure the forest, because it's only when you see the forest that you actually know what's going on. And you know, this is an important point, I would say. You know, it's interesting, and I'm not saying it's not important, that we analyze and look at who's become president or who's become prime minister. But in the greater scheme of things, the greater picture of things, the greater forest of things, they're just twigs. They're twigs in the forest. And if we get so consumed by them, then we lose the essential element of research, and that's peripheral vision. You know, say to people, you know, if you've got a pen or something, I don't know, pair of glasses, anything on the table while you're listening to this, pick it up, put it in front of your eyes about 2 inches away, and focus on it. Where's the rest of the world gone now?
Right.
It's a blur. All you can see is what you're focused on. And that is a psychological trap which happens when we become obsessed with twigs and lose sight of the forest. Because the picture is much, much bigger, far, far more bigger than who is in the White House. And I think, just my personal point of view, the alternative media needs to start expanding its own vision. It's done a fantastic job revealing elements of the world of the seen and the world of the five senses, so that people can see a different narrative, an explanation of the world that they see and experience every day. But that world is just a movie screen. It's just the movie screen that's coming out of the hidden. It's coming out of hidden forces, hidden networks, hidden manipulation. Even in the end, not even human. And that's where the projection, which slaps on the screen, and we call this the world that we see, that's where it's coming from. And when you see that vision of the scale of what's going on, then really who's in the White House becomes much smaller deal than it would otherwise be. And if we go on trying to change the world of the seen, purely in the world of the seen, then the hidden hand is going to crack open another bottle and celebrate, because it knows, because it understands, or the deep part of it does, it understands the nature of, illusory nature of so-called physical reality. That if we go on trying to change the movie screen on the movie screen, then we're never going to get anywhere. You know, if you don't like the movie, it's no good getting a banner and going on the stage of the movie theater and shouting abuse at the screen. It's not going to change. It's happened. It's a done deal. Where is this coming from? And we've got to, I think, as an alternative media, start to bite the bullet, take a big swallow for those that are still only seeing the five sense level of everything, and start to tramp down this rabbit hole to much deeper levels, because that's the only way we're going to change anything. You know, in the end, everything is consciousness. Everything is consciousness interacting with itself. You know, it's funny, I've just been adding a couple of things to the book I'm writing at the moment about the placebo effect. And the way that people take a pill that is nothing more than a sugar pill, but they believe it to be a real pill that's going to cure them, and the symptoms disappear. Nothing's happened except they believe that pill that isn't is going to remove them. And there's a professor, a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon professor at Oxford University, who's come out this week and said that thousands of people are having unnecessary operations. And the reason they've had the operation is disappeared, not because of the operation, but because they believe the operation would make it disappear. In other words, the mind, the perception is everything, which is why, it's funny, how about that for synchronicity, with
right.
the book Perception, Deception on the screen. And it's the perception level that is the foundation of human control. The Trumps and the Bushes and the Obamas and all these people are players in the game. Come and they go. But the level that's always there, and what decides what this world is and how this world is human perception. Let's go back to what I said earlier about Ethel at the checkout.
Please.
If that's the perception of self, that is the life you will live. I've got no power. Nothing exciting ever happens to me. Well, you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what happens. That's what it all is. If you perceive yourself to be infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience, I am all powerful. I am potentially all knowing. Then you come from that perception. It is going to interact with reality and manifest from the quantum fields of possibilities and probabilities a very different life, a very different potential to those that believe they are little me. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the whole foundation of human control, yes, we can talk about manipulated wars. We can talk about manipulated false flags, talk about manipulated banking systems. Yes, and we should. But the bottom line is the control of perception, because they know, because of these self-fulfilling prophecies that we live, where what we perceive, what we believe we perceive, and what we perceive we experience. That if they control what we perceive, they are, through this process, controlling what we experience.
Right.
And it's this level of taking control back of our perceptions, not only of perceived external reality, it's not really, but perceptions of self. No more little me. No more, oh, well, he's done this research and so it must be right. I'm just little me. I better just believe him. No, question it all. Become your own power. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Your own arbiter of truth, and not a repeater of someone else's.
So I 100% agree with you, and it's something that we've really taken on our shoulders on this particular show, is that I really do feel that our job, there's enough out there of springing things left or right, and that our job is really to start removing fear and allowing people to step forward as who they really are. But that fear is so, and I see it, and I see people fighting it constantly. As you've moved through your career of spreading the truth, as you've helped to start eliminating, maybe at first some people get a little more afraid, but then they start to become less afraid as they recognize what their power is. I'm interested to know, if we decide to take this on our shoulders, if we decide as more people in alternative media to really approach this from a psychological and a spiritual dimension, to say that we can really start to raise people's consciousness, elevate people into something new, and take them out of that control grid, out of that hologram, that matrix. Because we haven't seen it, or we don't know, certainly the history of civilization is people inside of this control grid. What does that start to look like? How will we know when this starts to manifest? How do people's behaviors and attitudes change en masse as that awakening starts to happen? What does the world start to look like?
Well, when you open your mind to more expanded consciousness, things don't look the same. Competing with each other, walking over people to get up to the illusory greasy pole no longer becomes something that is desirable. It becomes ludicrous, becomes childlike, pointless. See, if you self-identify, and self-identity stroke perception is the whole foundation of this. If you self-identify with your name and your life story and your religion and your race and country and everything like that, then you, from that point of observation, become isolated from everyone else who has a different name and a different life story and a different race and a different country or whatever. And so the fault lines for divide and rule become limitless. And we see it all the time. Muslims played off against Muslims, and religions played off against religions, income brackets against income brackets, left against right. When you start to identify as being a point of attention within infinite awareness, and you realize that every other human, every other tree, every other plant, every other animal, every other insect, every other breath of air, drop of water is a point of attention within the same infinite awareness, because if it isn't, it can't exist, because that's all there is, consciousness. Then you start to see unity. You start to see that actually the divisions are illusory. We're all one consciousness having different experiences. And that unity creates enormous power in the so-called but not external world. There are various places around the Earth where they monitor the Earth's magnetic field. And on 9/11, when people globally were seeing and reacting to that horror on television, there was an enormous spike in that field, impacted by the emotional response of the population. So when we feel emotion, when we think thoughts, they don't happen in a vacuum. They generate electromagnetic energy, frequencies. The denser emotions, not least fear, anxiety, depression, a need for violence and control over, are very low frequency states. And when we have a world of fear, not only does that vibrational state impact upon the individual feeling those emotions and brings their field into a low frequency state, it's pouring that into the collective field, the sea of energy that we all live in. And therefore, we are interacting, if you like, and I say this is not even symbolic, this is literal. We are interacting with that Wi-Fi field, if you want to use that analogy, and it's accurate to do so. And that Wi-Fi field is affecting us as we are affecting it. And that brings the whole, if you like, information, the information pool within that field into very low vibrational states, which are based on low vibrational emotion and very, very limited thinking. You see, when you think in a very limited way, we talk about people being closed-minded. But what is a closed mind? It's a low frequency state. And a low frequency state cannot connect with a high frequency state, which is a state of expanded awareness. So people literally are in a bubble or a box of perception. And that has become this self-fulfilling prophecy. If we could see on an energetic level, we would see distorted, inverted energetic frequencies pouring out of people into the collective field. And those people interacting with that field and being affected by it, another feedback loop, self-fulfilling prophecy. When we go into states of expanded awareness, when we open the heart, which of course is where we get intuition from, why does intuition come from the heart? Why do we feel it here? I just know. It's because this is our point of connection to expanded awareness. Innate intelligence, not taught intelligence, programmed intelligence, what we call the intellect, the left side of the brain overwhelmingly, but the heart. And the reason intuition knows, I mean, we don't say my intuition is working it out.
Right.
We go, look, I'm working it out. I'm thinking. We don't say that here. We say, I just know. Why? Because intuition, the heart knows, because it's connecting with those levels of awareness that do know. It doesn't have to work it out. And once we start opening our heart, becoming intuitive beings rather than thinking beings alone, very low level of awareness thinking, and we start expanding our self-identity and our perceptions of possibility and our perceptions of everything. And we start to realize we're all one. And what are we fighting each other for? What are we fighting each other for? We're all one consciousness having different experiences. Hey, come here, man. Let's chill out. That dramatically changes the information in the end. The frequency information states that we are broadcasting into the collective field. And they then start expanding the frequency of the collective field, which everyone is interacting with, and then they start getting influenced and affected by that rather than low vibrational emotion and the self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the stadium on which this is going to be sorted out. Because if we go on trying to change the world of the five senses within the world of the five senses, we are playing away from home. First of all, we're trying to do the impossible, which is change the movie once it's hit the screen. And secondly, we are operating in this realm of the five senses that this hidden hand manipulation is expert at manipulating. By getting you to look over here, so over there, like the hands of the magician, look over there while I do something here. They're brilliant at that. But when you go into the realms of true self, expanded self, intuitive self, they can't do that. Because while they're doing the fancy tricks with the magician's hands, this is saying, I can see both your hands, mate. I see what you're doing. Because you are, in terms of your perception, you are not like that. You are on top of the hill, looking at it all, seeing the forest, and you become more and more difficult to scam, because the range that you're seeing things expands so much. You have to be there to be scammed on the scale that the human race has been scammed, perception-wise. It's perception that's going to change everything. And the alternative media needs to start in far greater numbers to understand this. Because what's happening, and I think that's one of the reasons that some people went for Trump, is if you don't see that this is where the manipulation is really happening, therefore this is the way where we have to sort it out, then you can go on year after year saying that's a false flag, it's all a scam, one force controls both sides. But what you can't see is an answer to it. You can't see an answer to it because you're looking for answers in the five senses. You're looking for answers in the movie that's already a done deal by the time you see it. And therefore that frustration can pull you back to old answers. Let's change the president and make him one of us. I'm not condemnatory about decisions that people have made in the alternative media, because I understand them. I understand why they've done it, many of them anyway. They're desperately trying to find an answer to what they've spent years identifying. But the answer to a problem is not another aspect of the same problem. You just continue the problem. We have to open our minds and look at the way reality works. Look at how we're interacting with it, how we're affecting it, and how it's affecting us. And let's change this reality. at the level where reality can be changed, and not kid ourselves that we can go on changing it where it can't be changed, because we're going to be very disappointed if we go on trying.
Wow. Powerful. David Icke, we're coming towards the end of this, but I do want to tell you, from me personally, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, you have been instrumental in moving this thing forward, in raising the consciousness, and actually manifesting those things which I think you set out to do. And I just want to tell you thank you personally from me, and all of the work that you still continue to do. I know you have an upcoming tour if people want to check that out, the Worldwide Wake Up Tour, right? So it's the worldwidewakeup.com.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. That's very kind. But I haven't even started yet. I haven't even started yet. The most important part of my life is yet to happen, because we need to go into these areas I'm talking about.
I love it.
Big time. Yeah, I've been going around the world. This is very, very encouraging. I've been going around the world since last June, a year now. I've been literally all around the world: America, Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe, and up into Scandinavia, everywhere. And there is an awakening going on. There are people looking at things they would never have looked at before, and the kind of people too. People that you would have said, no, never him, never her. Yes, them. They are starting to look at it. People are beginning to look at it. It's not the majority yet, nothing like the majority, but compared with what it was when I started out 27 years ago, woo, it's extraordinary. And I'm writing a book at the moment, all day, every day, to get it finished, and then I'm picking up the tour again in Canada in late August, early September. Then I'm going to France and Bratislava, and also to Maastricht, right on the border in Holland, the Netherlands, right on the border with Germany, just inside the Netherlands, for the simple reason that in the free, democratic country of Germany, they won't allow me to speak.
Oh, wow.
So we've tried about 15 venues, and they all get the treatment, and the threats and stuff like that. So we're just over the border from Germany, but people from Germany can get there easier, a large part of Germany anyway. And when the authorities are saying you can't speak, then you must be saying something they don't want people to hear. So thanks to the German authorities for confirming that, and I'm going to keep going anyway.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm glad that you are. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad for everything that you've done. And so, David Icke, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. This has been a dream come true, really. So thank you very much. And hopefully we will be able to have you back on again to talk about your new book when it's ready.
Yeah, that would be great. And it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, David.
It's been a great chat. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.